Welcome to the Women's Football Show here on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel, the first of the year. I'm Kerry Pollock, joined here with Alison, McConnell and Cara, Henderson. Let's have a look at the results from the opening weekend. It was Queen's Park 0, Rangers 14, Glasgow City 6, Aberdeen 1, Dundee United 1, Motherwell 6, Hibernian 6, Spartans 0, Celtic 4 and Partick Thistle 2. Cara, let's talk about your game then, albeit you watched on from the sides, but a good account of yourselves.
Yeah, I thought the girls did really well. I think it was obviously, you know, the pitch wasn't the best. There was a lot of AstroTurf on it, to probably taking the effects from the men's game on Friday night. But listen, I thought the girls did really well. I thought they competed well. They kept it at 1-0. Obviously, a great goal to get it back in, for boys' say. And so, yeah, I think we gave ourselves an opportunity at 1-1. We had a pretty big chance as well. And I think if it had gone 2-1, it would have been really interesting at that point, because I actually thought that, you know, our banks, we were sort of in a really good defensive structure. And in the end, unfortunately, Celtic, you know, they pounced on a few errors from our point of view. And 4-2 probably doesn't reflect how the game went, but I think we can take positives from it. I think obviously though, when you have an opportunity like we did, you know, you get it at 1-1 late in the second half, you want to try and get something from the game. Not
the victory, as you mentioned, but it's certainly something to build on performance-wise.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's definitely what we're looking at now. We know we know what's in front of us in terms of how the table looks and points and what have you. So all we can do is take care of our business. And I think that given the fact that they obviously, you know, they'd had a proper training camp, we'd only had 2 sessions, and obviously our training session on Thursday had got cancelled because of the ice. I think only having 2 sessions, that was a great account of ourselves in terms of their structure and our shape.
I thought Brian Graham made a really pointed remark about that in the build up to the game, where he was saying, you know, Celtic have been in Gran Canaria preparing for this all week, a nice luxurious warm weather training camp, while, you know, they're scrambling about trying to find training facilities in sub-zero temperatures. And
yeah, it just shows the difference, which I think is why actually it was such a good account of ourselves yesterday, because obviously Thursday as well is when we sort of take more time to look at, you know, our match analysis and our shape, and that was taken away from us. So to go and put in a performance like that with only 2 days training, with the cobwebs from Christmas as well, I think the girls should be really proud of themselves.
Bit of a different training session for yourself, Cara, with your injury. Where are you with it, and are you hoping to get back soon?
Yeah, I think the injury probably came at a decent time just before Christmas, so we had the sort of 2 weeks that I could allow myself not to miss training, not to miss any games. And I was saying yesterday as well, obviously I didn't have to go on a bus to Aberdeen as well, and obviously that got cancelled. So all being well, I would really hope that yesterday was the only game I do miss, but obviously with all things, I don't want to rush it. So looking hopefully to be back for Dundee in a couple of weeks. But yes, you don't want to rush these things, because I certainly don't want it to become a problem.
No, well, fingers crossed for you, Alison. Just back onto the game, as Cara mentioned, a great equaliser from Carla Boyce, but what is Caitlin Hayes thinking?
Yeah, no, I think to be fair to her, yeah, it didn't look good at all. I do wonder about the surface, our new Douglas Park. I don't think it's...
lots of ash. There was just like lots of AstroTurf just sitting on top of it, and it looked like it was causing issues.
Especially given the week that it's been and the temperatures, and I don't think it's the best surface at all. I think it's a very difficult surface to play on. So I think you would have to say that maybe she's just been caught out by that. But an interesting one, because Celtic have committed to that ground now for, you know, it's I'm not sure. I think whenever you speak to anyone, there's very much a party line. I would be interested to know, like, I think when you do a comparison between Hamilton and even Airdrie, which is also an Astro pitch, I think the consensus was that Airdrie was a better surface to play on. But certainly, I think Celtic could be relieved just to get the win, no hiccups, and just kind of make sure they're banking 3 points. They play one of their games in hand on Wednesday night. I think they play Aberdeen on Wednesday night. They've got 2 games in hand to win. Should they win both of those games, they're right back in the mix. I think they would close the gap on Glasgow City to 3 points, and I think they would go a point ahead of Rangers should they win both of them. But obviously a massive game now coming up on Sunday.
Yes.
Absolutely huge. I think Celtic haven't beaten Rangers so far this season. I think it was a draw, and then they lost to them at New Douglas Park earlier in the season, so it'll be an interesting one on that. An interesting one for both teams, I would say.
We haven't seen Celtic drop points since November, Alison, but have you seen a drop in performances, particularly this season?
Yeah, I think you'd be hard pressed to say no. This is a Celtic team that are sitting 5th in the league. I think now you would qualify that by saying win their 2 games in hand, and they cut the deficit on Glasgow City to 3 points. They would go a point ahead of Rangers if they win those 2 games in hand, albeit that they've got Rangers to play on Sunday too. However, I think there's no doubt that trying to compete across 2 fronts tax this squad both mentally and physically, particularly when you consider the volume of games and just how quickly they were coming on the back of one another without much opportunity for training in the middle. But it was interesting because Elena Sadiku was very irked last week when we spoke to her. She wasn't happy at what she perceived to be a criticism of this team. She felt as though they've not really had the credit that they deserved for what they've achieved. She calls them her history makers, which I think they are without any doubt. However, I don't think there's any doubt that so far they've underperformed at times in the league. I think you'll see, or certainly should expect to see, a very different Celtic side across the second half of the campaign because they're free from the demands of Champions League football. There'll be an opportunity to focus purely on training and working on the training ground and focus on the defence of their title. But what I would also say is I think Glasgow City are a very different proposition this season than what they were last term. I think not a question that they're viable title contenders. Last season what you saw eventually became in the latter stages a kind of 2-horse race. It was reflected in the final league table. This season I think there's 3 in the mix.
Absolutely, well, still plenty of football to be played. Celtic are a fairly experienced squad, you would say. Are some players perhaps maybe looking for a new challenge in the next coming seasons?
Well, certainly there are persistent rumours about Caitlin Hayes. I think Elena Sadiku was very keen to knock them down on Friday. She attributed them to an agent, maybe just stirring the pot a little bit. She has been linked with various moves, kind of linked with going down south, linked with a couple of European clubs too. I think they've circulated really since the end of last summer, the end of last season. So interesting to see how that one develops. She also made a point of saying that she had done her work where incoming transfers were concerned, that she had done all the talking and selling that was necessary, but she was waiting on people just getting those deals over the line, which I thought was a fairly pointed remark in terms of more or less saying hurry up and get them done.
Absolutely, a few interesting weeks to come then. Cara, they do have Rangers next week in the semi-final, an entertainment game last time out to say the least. What can we expect to see this time?
Yeah, I think obviously one-off game as well, that it's anything can happen and there's silverware up for grabs. So I think it'll be really, really exciting. I think that you want it to be as exciting as it was last time. I think that obviously gained quite a lot of traction in terms of interest and people talking about it. And obviously, I generally don't know what way it'll go. I think Celtic without the European games are an interesting force to be reckoned with. I also think though, if they've got the game midweek, you know, they had to work hard yesterday for our game as well. Don't know if Rangers are playing. I don't think Rangers have got a game midweek, so that extra time to recover as well. So I don't know. It'll be very interesting, but I think it's good. I think you want these blockbuster games, and I could not call what way I think it's going to go.
Yeah, it'll be an exciting one. On to Rangers then. A fanatic win over Queen's Park. 8 different goal scorers, including 2 own goals. Is that the reaction that Joe Potter would have wanted, especially after those games dropping points before Christmas?
Yeah, for sure. I think obviously unfortunately these scorelines have came a wee bit regular this season. It's not easy. It's a really, really tough scoreline to be on the end of. But in terms of from Rangers and Joe Porter's point of view, I'm sure they'll be delighted with it. To share goals as well, that's always what you want. You want players always are more confident when they've scored a goal. So yeah, I think it's a statement win for sure.
It's interesting though. I think Rangers started the season with big wins like this, of really emphatic victories over teams that are at the bottom end of the table, but where you've seen them struggle is the top end. You know, they've dropped points to Glasgow City, to Hibs. Those back-to-back 3-0 wins I think would have surprised everyone. So I think they're not going to be judged on battering teams like Queen's Park, who are going to be fighting for their survival in the top flight. They'll be judged on how they compete against those at the other end.
How huge of a mentality boost would this be for either side, this semi-final coming up, league-wise? I know it's a cup competition.
Psychologically, I think it's huge. I think probably Rangers won, obviously, the last game, but I think it'll have annoyed Celtic not to have taken something. I think definitely when you're competing against your biggest rivals, there's so little between the teams, really, when it comes to the league table. I think there is definitely something to be drawn from winning this one. I know it doesn't obviously affect It has nothing to do, no bearing on the league table, but I think psychologically, I think it is important when they play one another so frequently. I definitely think that it has an impact.
You mentioned Glasgow City earlier, 5 points clear at the top of the table at the moment. Just how dominant will we see this team going forward from the run into the end of the season?
I think they'll be keen to just keep the consistency going. I think they've been quietly going about their business since the start of the season. I think at the end of last term, you might have wondered whether or not this was the shape of things to come, that Celtic and Rangers dominate, Glasgow City maybe just lose a bit of traction, a bit of ground. They made big changes on and off the field, lots of different aspects of recruitment, and I think what you have seen is this has been a dominant team for the last 10-15 years, and they're very unwilling to relinquish that dominance and that grip that they've had on the Scottish game. I think they've got a good backroom team. I think Leanne Crichton has been a really wise addition, obviously with Scott Booth going up to Aberdeen. Leanne Crichton knows the lay of the land, she knows the league inside out, she knows the club, she knows the mentality at the club, as obviously does Leanne Ross, and I think having both of them in there, two very different characters, but I think having both of them in there is good. And I think Glasgow City get big players back from injury too. I thought they really missed Brenna Lovera at points last season. Having her back in and amongst the goals, I think they are a formidable outfit on their day, and I think they will have drawn huge psychological boost from that win over Rangers. The manner of the win, not just to win, but how they done it, the emphatic nature of that win. And I think they'll just be looking now, just keep the head down, go game by game, and not get too excited and too carried away. I don't think they're the kind of team that would. I don't think. I think they've got coaches in there that will keep feet on the ground. And it was interesting actually because Leanne Crichton was saying in the aftermath of the win yesterday, they're 15 minutes in and they're 4-0 up, and she was saying, it's probably the best football I've seen across the league all season. However, she was annoyed that they hadn't sustained it across the full course of the game. Inevitable, I think, that you have some kind of drop off when the game's won after 15 minutes, that there's an element that the tempo comes down a bit. But I think what you see is a demand for a certain standard there.
Yes, certainly. Hearts aren't in action until next weekend, Cara. They're back. They've went on 2 separate runs of 4 wins, picked up a couple of draws, but I think Eve Olid will be fairly happy with the form that they've started with the season with.
Yeah, and I think they provided, challenge to the top 3 teams, which will definitely be Hibs and Hearts' aims. I would have thought that, with the sort of full-time, it's been a couple of years of that now, that you want to maybe see, can you sort of, how much can you challenge those top teams? I think they've done that. I definitely think when we've played against, Hibs and Hearts this year, there's been a definite step away from the sort of other 7 or so teams in the league. But yeah, I think they will be. I think they've got quality all through their team. I think that it'll be really interesting to see how it shakes down. Obviously there's a point when they were both above Celtic, but I think Celtic have kind of clawed that back now, and it'll be interesting. I think obviously the top 6 this year, it will provide really, really interesting games, because no matter how far ahead you are before the split, you've then got to play obviously every team again. So yeah. I think it'll be a really interesting league, and I think the more competitive it is with teams challenging the top 3, the more interesting it makes it as well.
And interesting, you mentioned the top 6. That brings us to Motherwell 6, Dundee United 1. Is it still between yourselves and Motherwell for a place in the top 6?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I mean, obviously they're in the driving seat firmly at the moment, and from a Partick Thistle point of view, we have no complaints with that. We're in the position we're in because of our own failings at points, our own mistakes, and I think it's full credit to Motherwell. They've done the business when they've had to. There is still a few games to go, so we certainly are not going to just lay down and let them have the top 6, but we know that we've just got to take care of business on our side, which we've not done at points, so that's on us, as I said, and we'll see how it is in, I think, 5 or 6 games time, or maybe 5 games time, and as I said, we'll see where we're at.
Yep, still plenty of football to be played. Let's have a look at the league table then before we finish, just to see how things are shaping up. Glasgow City out in front, 5 points ahead. Then we have Rangers tucked in behind, our Hibernian on 39, just a point adrift are Hearts. Celtic with that game in hand are 5th. Motherwell complete the top 6. Thistle on 18 and 7th, followed by Spartans. Montrose in behind there as well. And the bottom 3, Aberdeen, Queen's Park and Dundee United. Well, on behalf of myself, Cara and Alison, thanks for listening and thanks for watching. We'll be back next week. See you then.